Hey, autoimmune warriors, welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. I am so fired up for you to be here. If you're navigating life with an autoimmune condition, you're in the right place. I am your host, Des, and I am not just a podcaster. I am right here in the trenches with you as a fellow autoimmune warrior. We're diving into real, uplifting stories and some seriously smart expert tips and simple lifestyle tweaks that can make a difference in how we feel day to day. Now I've got to give a huge shout out to my amazing listeners. You're the heartbeat of this podcast, and I'm so grateful for you tuning in. If you're loving the vibes, here is how you can keep the love flowing. Drop a rating on Spotify, share a quick review on Apple, or pass this episode along to a warrior buddy who can use a boost of hope. Here are some nations that are killing it for our community. Workers with Autoimmune Ailments Alliance. These folks are fighting the good fight for students and workers like us with autoimmune conditions. Want to get involved or learn more? Swing by you.org. They'll love to have you. Leap Cure. They're all about hooking up patients with cutting-edge clinical trials and putting our voices front and center. Check them out at leapcure.com. Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. They offer nutrient-packed supplements based on science. Snag 20% off your first order with my code DEZ, D-E-Z, at Adapt Naturals. From my heart to yours, I'm sending you nothing but love and good vibes. Let's dive in together. So welcome to the podcast. Today, we are joined by Hope, the visionary behind Hope Rose, a movement born from profound loss and belief that life-altering events hold divine purpose. With decades of entrepreneurship experience as a sponsored ultra endurance athlete and featured on NBC nightly news, today's show, Hope is transforming grief into alchemy. Her mission? To guide and support souls in turning their ashes into beauty. So, Hope Rose, I wonder if we can start from the beginning.
The short story of my grief and trauma is I was involved in a domestic violence relationship, and it was violence and abuse of every imaginable facet that you can think of, and had a little boy. Ultimately, my son was trafficked from me through the court system.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, loss and obviously a loss of that degree is severe trauma, and it can really trigger autoimmune responses. And so in my decades of working with people, I've had, maybe symptoms of autoimmune. And autoimmune is really the body's way of processing trauma. It's processing trauma that's never been metabolized, because diseases can really wreak havoc on daily life. And so that is kind of my approach to, healing mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah, I've read the book by Gabor Mate, The Body Knows, and you go from any chronic illness or any illness, period, and it's rooted to some type of body-mind connection or trauma that you're holding inside yourself, and you have to learn how to cope with it, deal with it, and learn new ways to find a new way of releasing it.
Right. And so trauma becomes trauma when it's not been witnessed and seen by another person. So it's literally like trapped in the person's body. And so if a person, is 30 or 40, that's when they maybe suffered trauma abuse in their childhood, they have decades of that trauma, of that story never being seen, witnessed, and held in a safe container to express that, to be heard. If our trauma stories have never been processed and metabolized. They literally get stuck in our tissues, in our cells, that subconscious. Coping is a skill that we've adapted to survive. And we want to get out of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, it's all the F words, responses, so we can live in, peace and harmony and love and joy and gratefulness. And so it's really about, doing the inner work, which is, very difficult, especially if a person has suppressed it and has just lived with coping strategies, whether that's eating or, just countless medications. And then that's really where dis-ease, it's a hyphenated word, DIS hyphen ease, it's dis-ease in the body. That's when we can come into ease in our body, when our story is expressed and shared and seen.
So it's not coping, it's really, like you said, getting into the sympathetic instead of the parasympathetic feelings or body emotions. I guess mind body, right? How are you dealing with your trauma today?
Well, I grew up with trauma, so I've been in this space all my life. So I'm very thankful that I had a very firm foundation with like my healthy principles that I've always lived by. I choose not to drink. I don't drink coffee. Like I have very clear, like health wellness boundaries. I teach breath work, but from a different modality than what most people think of breath work. This is really repatterning our breathing system. I have some videos on my Instagram and YouTube if anybody wants to check it out. But there's like 5 core exercises that people can do really anywhere. Like whether you're in an airport, whether you're at home or at the office, like in a park, like it's super easy. I've been doing neurofeedback at home every day as well for 10 minutes to help with CPTSD and that trauma, and kind of lowering the fight flight response and focus that has helped. I do a variety of daily and weekly rituals, staying present in the body. If I feel like I'm kind of, what I say, like go offline, like I try to, what do I see? I see a fridge, I see a car, like I see a bird, and really kind of like come back to that present moment. And that can kind of bring ease into the sympathetic system. And the same with obviously the breath work. It's all, sympathetic, bring your system out of that fight and flight response into, into harmony.
Yeah. So it sounds like you dealt with trauma in the past, and you've learned how to deal with it most recently also. What helped you back then as opposed to now? What was the difference? What tools have you added to create a releasing of this trauma?
Yeah, I mean, years ago, I started running when I was a teenager. And so that was, my healthy outlet to deal with what was going on and trying to process things. And then obviously, I became like, it was my career as a runner. And yeah, the things I have added are some of the things I just, previously mentioned, like expanding, my nervous system through breath work and repatterning the diaphragm. The neurofeedback. I have always been a writer, and like I love to journal, and I have a very dedicated practice now. I write like 15, 20 minutes a morning, and I always do a page at night as well, every day. Everybody's always focused on like the morning routine, and then night kind of just gets shoved. And so I'm really meticulous about making sure I write twice a day, every morning and every night. And I look forward to it. And then making it fun too. I use a different color every day. So it's really fun to kind of like go back and look through the pages and like, just see all the different colors.
What does writing do? I know it definitely releases, but what is the connection between the brain and the outlet of physically writing something down?
It changes your neurochemistry. So anytime you do something different, it does that. And it's almost a somatic exercise of like getting it out. And so that helps the brain process it, and it's not like stuck. It's just really simple things. Like if people go to my website, they can download a free PDF of like 25 ways to transform your life in 2025. I think that's one of them on there, but almost all of them are free. And that will help reduce the cortisol in your body when you have like an autoimmune disease, and it helps regulate the body too. So it's all those just different fun little ways that are totally free that you can begin to heal your body and your mind and your spirit today. That's another thing I added in was IFS, internal family systems. Super helpful. I highly recommend that to anybody, but it's parts work. So IFS, I highly recommend as well. And then like energetic healing as well. It's a lot easier to, work in the energetics and then work kind of on the 3D things. So you're not swimming upstream, climbing uphill. So that is, can be super helpful for listeners.
Well, thank you for going through all those things. I think some people aren't, maybe some people aren't familiar with somatic work. And do you practice somatic work with your clients, or do you introduce them to it?
Yeah, but I mean, personally and with clients, or with, anybody I'm talking to, I've even, that I should mention that as part of so I've kind of, developed my own writing process. Let me finish up that thread on the writing. When you write at the end of your morning pages and your night pages, write, I love you, your name. Do that twice a day for 30 days. I'm almost at a year of doing it twice a day. It will change your life. When was the last time you actually told yourself, I love you? And, it's all these different tools that will help your body feel at ease. And it will, again, lower that, cortisol response, that, parasympathetic back into kind of peace and harmony. So again, that's a tool that somebody can use of just writing, I love you. And it might feel foreign at first until oh my gosh, I actually feel it. You could also say it in the mirror as well, like, I love you. And it can be a very moving practice. Again, free tool for anybody to implement today. And so it's really kind of coming back in to get to your body question, somatic, of really just lovingly, I'm closing my eyes if you're, listening to this, and just put, butterfly hug, just putting your arms, over your body and just lightly touching yourself, and maybe just feeling how soft that is. I'm touching the arm of my skin, and you can feel I'm safe. You can even feel I feel my belly relax, and you're letting yourself know, your system, we're safe. Because only you can really give yourself safety. The world is, yes, it's not a safe place, and it's not designed to create safety for you. You create safety for yourself through healing, processing, boundaries, and really loving yourself first and foremost. And so somatic is, super helpful with the breath work. I shared it at the beginning, even just giving yourself a butterfly hug, just really coming into contact with your body. Just when was the last time you gave yourself a loving, gentle hug? It's so beneficial. Obviously hugs from other people, the oxytocin, at least 30 seconds can be, super beneficial as well. But somatic is super important to, healing the body, and, for anyone dealing with an autoimmune condition, really nurture yourself through that somatic touch. That's a form of nourishment, just as food and, healthy drink, somatic, self-touch is extremely beneficial.
Yeah, thank you for all those tips. And I'm sure listeners will go to your website to find that PDF that they can get some great tools from. I was wondering, when you first get a client, how do you even start working with them? How do you know how much is too much? Obviously, they probably will tell you, but have you ever, what are some, things you intake, you start off slowly, you experiment with, just to see where they're at? How do you test the temperature or the waters?
Yeah, so it's a process. A new relationship is going to grow over time with letting them know that they're safe with me, letting them know that their system is safe with me. And so, one of the first questions I ask is how do you want to feel in 30 days, 60 days, a year from now, 5 years? How do you want to feel? So that's really what people, whether it's, whether they want $1 million or the boat or the house or the relationship, they're really going after the feeling. What will that feeling bring to me? Success, love, acceptance, joy. And so we kind of reverse engineer it. Okay, so we're shooting for joy and love and success and, acceptance, but we have to work back here, really on the energetic level. And, where are we starting now? And it's kind of a discovery process really all along the way. Of oh, this came up. Oh, this triggered me. Oh, interesting. let's get curious. Where do we have an opportunity for, at this moment? Very interesting that you went back in this pattern. Okay, what can you do next time this comes up? So it's really kind of a discovery questionnaire process as we go through working together. And, it requires a lot of trust on both people's parts.
Yeah. Yeah, I could imagine it's a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward. It's a lot of, given how much work they put in and how much it triggers them. I could imagine it being very unique process.
Exactly. Everybody has their own blueprint of, what triggers me might not trigger you. And
Yeah.
everybody, yeah, and it's, you know, and when dealing with trauma, like, they always, the spiritual quote out there is, triggers are, is our teacher. And for somebody, maybe in the very beginning, that might, set them off. Like, great, I just lost my child. You're telling me like this trigger is my teacher. And so it could take a while. Like I said, this actually on a podcast a couple weeks ago, of maybe that person's not ready for you to reframe something in this moment. Maybe they just need you to sit and say, I'm here with you. I hear you. I understand. I know how difficult it is. Maybe we can reframe things in a month. Maybe it's tomorrow. Like there's no timeline for this. We're not on sure, you want to feel XYZ by, these dates, but that's what we're moving towards. It doesn't have to be a set in stone goal. And so it's really, really about meeting the person where they are at this moment. And it's on my side, it's kind of like that skill set that is just like, how far can I take them to the edge without taking them over it?
Yeah, I could imagine that's a fine balance.
For sure.
So as a former ultra endurance athlete, what physical, mental resilience tools do you use to apply to your recent trauma?
Yeah, I mean, so I've run 14 50 milers, 4 100 milers, all at one time. Or the distance is at one time. People say life is like a marathon. Life is like an ultra marathon in my opinion, at least for my personal experience. And it's kind of like the long game of like, this is going to take mental endurance. Things, might not change overnight. Like this is a multi-year process. I've been given the gift of self-control and discipline and commitment and kind of seeing like the bigger picture. And really it's taken a daily act of surrender every single day of like, and I've always said, like, how can I steward my story for the highest good of all, to really serve others with it and use it to the best of my ability instead of just, hiding under the covers.
Yeah. And that's where I guess the resilience and the reframing, or the reframing for resilience, comes through to help you every day, try to reframe everything that comes your way.
Right. And, I'm going to be, totally transparent. I am not reframing every single day. I have very dark moments, very dark hours, because I'm having a human experience and we all are. And so I think it's really important, if you're going through, challenging health situations or custody nightmare or, whatever the story is, of allowing yourself to have that grief and not getting stuck in it. And that's why we have trauma, because we get stuck in that grief, that cycle of grief and that sadness, and we don't get out of it. And so really giving yourself like permission to grieve, and then permission for grace to do something different in an hour, 5 hours. Like give yourself a short deadline of like, okay, I'm going to set up my, my grieving space, and then I'm going to, put my shoes back on and say, okay, we got this. What can I do now to move my life forward? Is it reaching out to a friend? Is it journaling? Is it making a nutritious meal? Is it, maybe it's, not drinking alcohol, like switching out habits that are not helping you, not serving you, for a healthy habit. Maybe you're spending too much time watching TV. Can I, go on YouTube and watch this podcast? Can I go on YouTube and watch something that's edifying my life? There's always so much opportunity for growth. And so it's this balance of giving yourself the opportunity to grieve, and then also giving your opportunity for growth.
I like your ability to sit with it, but then also move on. And thank you for sharing that not every day is daisies and roses. It's really you are doing the work just like everybody else that has trauma. One of the basic questions I guess I hadn't asked was what is trauma? I mean, how do you even know you have trauma?
I don't know the Webster definition of trauma, but from my learning with my teachers and mentors, trauma can be big T. I always say I have big T, big R, like all the letters, like trauma, all capitalized, or it can be little T. And so little T could be somebody bullying you in school. It could be a child invited somebody else to a birthday party and you weren't invited. Like traumas can be just events that are seemingly small that had a big impact on your life, or they can be the big T traumas of sexual abuse and violence, and maybe somebody's growing up with violence in the streets, in the home. There's all types of different traumas, but they still have an impact on our psyche, on our emotional body, and especially as children. Like by the age of 7, all of our beliefs are pretty much hardwired. So those first 6-7 years of our life are crucial. And again, that's where disease shows up in the body. And I'll say that too, like your diagnosis is not your prognosis. Like really watch your language. Like I have, or I'm in the process of healing fibromyalgia, or whatever the disease is. Because if you identify with it, like you don't say, I am cancer, I am diabetes, I am, autoimmune disease. You're identifying yourself as that. I don't think most people want to identify themselves. Most people are like, I want to be happy, but just really watch, like your language of how you phrase things throughout the day. And that is a pattern interrupt. And that will also start the healing process, because when you interrupt a pattern, the brain is like, we're doing something different. So language
Yeah.
is one of the things I really work on with my clients.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, because language is part of writing and you're expressing these things and it can have an internal effect. There's a biology of belief but he does mention something similar as to what you were mentioning. You show me a 7-year-old and I can tell you the man he's going to be, because by the time a person is 7 years old, they already formed all their beliefs, their personality, and you basically, it's hard to rewire all of those systems. And what you are helping do is try to rewire those systems.
Right. So, all hope is not lost. It's hope rose for a reason. Yes, that is like the biological blueprint that, yes, by the age of 7, we have our beliefs, it's kind of, but we are maladaptable. Like we can't, it's really changing like the epigenetics. Just because those beliefs were formed by that, but that age does not mean that you have to stay stuck in that for the rest of your life. We're kind of, a lot of people are in the stuck, sick, sad, stressed syndromes, kind of what I call it. And to move out of that, it's a process, and it's time, and it's healing, and it's doing, all the works, and it is possible.
I love that. I hear so much. I hear your story and it's very, very sad. And it takes a lot of work and a very strong person to work on yourself and continue to work on yourself and help others. With all that being said, what is your hope 2 years, 5 years from now with yourself, with with Hope Rose, with running?
Yeah, I mean, I have some big goals on the whiteboard for sure. I have an athletic event. No person has ever done it before, so I'm going to keep it under wraps until I announce it. But that is something on my list that has to do with running. And so there's, kind of the athletic portion. I have, goals for my business of, helping, supporting a million humans to really heal like their trauma and their disease. Because when I support a million humans, that's 10 million people. But when one person heals, another person heals. And so it's kind of like the mentorship model, and it just keeps growing. I mean, obviously, I cannot wait for my son to be home for sure. It's at the top of the list. And really showing others what's possible, of like, your entire life can be burned to the ground and you can rise from the ashes too. It takes a lot of work and resilience and gumption and tenacity, and it can be done.
I know you talked about some practical tips. You have them on your website. How do you address your loneliness that you do not have that attachment anymore with your son?
How do I address the loneliness? Really meeting that aspect of me that's lonely, even from like childhood, of like, okay, loneliness as a child, how's it showing up in my life today? Okay, I see you're lonely. What do you need? Do you, need it like just visually, like, okay, I'll give you a hug. This may sound really funny to the listeners. I actually bought an organic stuffed small teddy bear and two small like organic dolls. Anyway, but I bought those really to hug at night. Inner child work, the little girl that didn't get the love that she, required as, as a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old, I can give that to her today. But it's really like, okay, this is the aspect of me that didn't get the love that she needed. How can I give her the love now? And kind of using that as, more symbolic, but also just a comforting thing. And, I started a community called the Glow Up Sisterhood. And it's for any mother, any woman that's going through family court, of giving them the tools and the healing that they need, going through, maybe, their situation is exactly like mine, but going through family court is a brutal process. It is not easy. It's super stressful. And so having that community of healing, not in a victim consciousness way, but really in a way where they can receive support. And that's one of the spaces, virtual, that I've created to kind of meet that, that epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah. I really wanted to interview you because a lot of people with autoimmune disease, they either have autoimmune disease because, like what you were talking about, they have the autoimmune disease because they have dealt with trauma and they don't know how to release it and sit with it or work with it the way you deal with it and help others. And then the other part is they didn't have any trauma, or they don't know. They definitely have some type of trauma being diagnosed with an autoimmune disease because your whole life has to change. You can't do the things that you did before. So you have to grieve and deal with your new diagnosis and what that means for you today. And I really do find it very hard for people to take that first step in trying to heal themselves because, like you said, it's very hard work and it's not going to just happen overnight. So for people that have gone through a shift, gone through a change in their life, most recently, not from past trauma, but most recent trauma, what is one first step that you think you can share with them?
So I guess if someone has just received a diagnosis, the question I would ask is, how are you using that diagnosis to beat yourself up or to validate your beliefs that you are a bad person? So I'll say this is like, shame is I am bad, guilt is I did bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you using that diagnosis to beat yourself up or to validate why you're in the position that you're in? Because you can let excuses keep you stuck for the rest of your life. And you can let that diagnosis overshadow everything. I can't do that because I have this. I can't do this because of this. And it becomes a crutch instead of saying, you know what? There are people that healed. Do I really want the healing, or am I more addicted to that survival state of getting sympathy from others? And it's really interesting when when you deal with, diagnoses, like there's a lot of sympathy. And sympathy really keeps you stuck. Sympathy is not empathy. Like we can have empathy for a person, and empathy is more empowering. So do you want to live a powerful life, or do you want to live a life that is more stuck? And the choice is yours. And it's pretty binary of like, okay, I have this diagnosis. I have the ability to change it. Yes, it's going to take work. Do I really want what I say I want to change it? Or do I want to live with this the rest of my life, or at least for the foreseeable future? And that's a choice that person has to make. And live with that choice, but don't get like, and if you live with that choice, then it's like, okay, I'm always going to be the victim. Or do you want to take the road of the victor of like, I have unprocessed trauma that I don't even realize. Maybe it happened in my childhood. Maybe it happened 2 years ago. Like it's almost inevitable that somebody who has autoimmune has some type of trauma. It could be generational too, that's been passed down. Some belief. It could be about money. It could be about love. Like trauma can go through the generations, and that's why the epigenetics can be changed. And so it's really asking yourself, do I want to stay stuck and sad and sick the rest of my life? Or do I want to use this as a catalyst to uplevel my life and be like, no, I'm stronger, I'm more powerful than what this Western medical doctor said. Maybe I need to clean up my eating. And so everything is just an opportunity really for growth. Like diagnosis is, again, it's not your prognosis. You can change anything if you want to. How do you want to feel in 6 months? Do you still want to feel defeated and powerless and, just at the whim of the doctor and, being relegated to that? Because that's it's almost like a ball and chain. Like you're always relegated to like medications and doctor's appointments. What happens if your appointments switch to like massages and like red light therapy and like organic facials? To me, that sounds much better, because here in America, like it's all just about prescriptions and just it's all coping and managing. It's not really getting to the root cause, and that's really like my goal for people: get to the root cause, heal, and have an amazing life. That's available to you at any time. Just pick the number. Let me know.
Yeah. Would you mind just briefly before we get into that, is you talked about generational trauma. What is that for people that aren't familiar with that?
Yeah, so generational trauma, let's say like my grandmother and grandfather grew up in the Great Depression. And so the belief of scarcity, like loved my maternal grandparents. I was very close with them, very grateful. And she would save the paper towels. Like after they were used, she would like just save them. And it was because she grew up in the Great Depression. This is the early, the 1900s. Like we're in 2025 at this point. And so that scarcity passes down through our nervous systems generationally. Then it trickled down to my mother, of always pinching pennies, and we have to like live in scarcity and poverty. And that trickled down to me. So it could be anything of, scarcity, lack, loss. And it just keeps trickling down through generations until someone is like, the buck stops here.
Do you think the generational trauma is passed down because of the actions, or is it more of a mental aspect or the biological aspect? I guess that's what I'm really wondering. By actions of your grandmother acting that way, it kind of went into your mother, not so much biological. Because I heard epigenetics. I was wondering, what do you believe, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, it's all like subconscious. It's like that epigenetic print, subconscious, because 100 years ago, 80 years ago, they didn't have the tools we have today to heal that stuff. And now we're kind of seeing the effects of like, we see the effects of generational trauma all around us. The family court system, perfect example. Our divorce rate. Like, we don't have healthy, functioning, normal families. I'll say this: 3.4 women a day are killed by former or current intimate male partners. That is generational trauma. Angry fathers just passing down their anger of like, we're going to get back at the women. We don't know how to take our anger out. We've never been like initiated into what true manhood is. We just take our anger out on abusing other women, or going so far as to freaking kill them. That is, that's obviously an extreme example, but it's all kind of nervous system epigenetic imprint that's subconscious. Carl Jung says, until we make the unconscious conscious, we're going to call it fate. And that's really what it is. Most people are just kind of repeating generational patterns.
Thank you for
Yeah,
explaining that.
yeah, you're welcome.
So, how can people work with you, learn more about you? What is your program called?
Yeah, so hoperosespeaks.com, Hope Rose Speaks on Instagram. It's Hope Rose Speaks. It's just easy to find everywhere on all the handles. And you can book a free 30-minute life audit coaching session is what I call it. I also have my own podcast where if you want a free like hour session with me, it's just audio only. It's no face. You can use a different name as well. And we can walk through a free hour of untangling it, whatever you're going through. I really enjoy those. And my program is called Forward. It can be found on my website. And then I have another offering called Heal Thy, and it is a fabulous container to build one healthy habit every 30 days. That is also found on my website as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So